sun stood high above the open plains, shining down on a land of tall grass, red dust, and long, quiet trails. A soft, warm breeze carried the smell of earth and sagebrush across the wide countryside. It was the kind of afternoon when everything moved slowly, except the heart of a woman struggling for breath on a lonely path. Her name was Mara Hale, a traveling helper who worked with merchant caravans. Today, however, she was riding alone. Her horse trotted along the narrow trail that wound between two rocky hills. Mara had taken this shortcut many times before, but today something felt different. She felt tired, more tired than usual. Her throat felt tight, her breaths felt rough, as if something inside her chest refused to expand properly. She blamed the long journey. The heat and the heavy travel coat wrapped around her shoulders. The collar of the coat pressed against her neck, and she tugged at it to loosen it. But the coat was old and the buckle had jammed. She forced a smile through her discomfort and tried again. Nothing. The trail dipped suddenly. Her horse stumbled slightly. Mara grabbed the reins quickly, but the movement yanked her coat's collar even tighter. It pressed hard against her throat. For a moment, panic shot through her like lightning. She pulled at the collar, but the buckle felt stuck, almost locked. Her breaths grew shorter. The air felt painfully thin. Her hands shook from the effort. Her vision blurred for a moment. "Not now. Please. Not now," she whispered. She tried calling out, but her voice came out as a breathless, weak sound. Her horse sensed her distress and stopped walking, lowering its head with concern. Mara leaned forward, coughed, and fought to breathe normally, but each second made the collar feel tighter. Her chest ached. Her heartbeat pounded hard against her ribs. She tried to tug at the coat again, but her fingers felt clumsy and useless. She needed help. She needed someone. But the trail was empty, silent, and lonely like most of her journeys. Just when she thought she might faint from fear and lack of air, she heard something faint in the distance. Horses' slow, steady footsteps. She looked up. A cowboy was riding toward her. He rode calmly as if he belonged to the land. His hat shaded his eyes, and his shirt clung to him from the heat. Dust covered his boots from long travel. His posture, straight and steady, showed confidence without arrogance. His name was Ethan Ward, though she didn't know it yet. He wasn't expecting to find anyone on this quiet afternoon. Normally he rode toward the trading post and back without seeing a single traveler. But today something made him slow down. A horse stood still in the middle of the path, its rider leaning forward and clutching at her own throat. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Immediately something was wrong. He nudged his horse forward quickly and stopped beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Mara tried to answer, but her voice was squeezed out. She lifted her trembling hand toward her collar, trying to show him. Ethan dismounted fast. "Easy, I'm right here." He stepped beside her horse and gently placed his hand on her arm. She was shaking. Her breaths came out in short, painful gasps. Her coat collar had twisted unnaturally, tightening like a rope. "Can I help loosen it?" he asked softly. She nodded quickly, desperately. Ethan worked without wasting time. He inspected the buckle, understood the problem, and carefully slid his fingers under the collar. His touch was steady and respectful, keeping her calm. "It's okay," he murmured. "I've got you." With precise movements, he pressed the jammed metal piece and slipped it free. The collar loosened instantly. Mara took a sharp breath, then another. Air filled her lungs again. Relief washed over her face. Her eyes softened, and the shaking in her hands slowly stopped. She leaned back in her saddle, breathing deeply, blinking away sudden tears. She had been so close to fainting. Ethan kept a gentle hand on her arm in case she felt dizzy. "You're all right now. Just breathe slow." Mara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I couldn't open it." "You're safe," he said. She blinked at him, expecting him to walk away now that she could breathe. Most travelers helped just enough to feel good about themselves, then left. But Ethan stayed. He checked her coat again, making sure nothing else was twisted. Then he examined her horse, stroking its neck to calm it. "You took a fall?" he asked. Not exactly, she said, still catching her breath. My horse stumbled. Then the collar pulled too tight. I couldn't fix it. That can happen with old buckles, he said. Lucky I came by. She smiled weakly. Lucky is one word. Ethan looked around. You shouldn't ride alone right now. You're pale, and the trail ahead is rough. My ranch is nearby. You can rest there until you feel stronger. Mara shook her head at first. I don't want to trouble you. It's not trouble, he said firmly. You shouldn't be riding when you're still breathless. It wasn't forceful, but his voice carried sincerity. It made it hard to refuse. Mara hesitated, then nodded silently. Ethan helped her down from the horse gently, like she was fragile glass. Her legs shook a little when they touched the ground, but he supported her with a steady hand. He guided her toward his horse, letting her lean on him if she needed to. You ride with me, he said. I'll lead your horse behind us. Mara blinked, surprised again. You don't even know me. He gave a tiny smile. I don't need to know you to help. Those words stayed in her heart. He helped her onto his horse, making sure she sat comfortably. Then he took the reins of her horse and began riding toward the west. The journey to his ranch took about 20 minutes, but to Mara it felt peaceful and strangely comforting. The wind brushed past her face gently. She could smell the earth, the grass, and something warm, maybe safety. Ethan didn't speak much. When he did, his voice was calm. Tell me if you need to stop. She nodded. I'm all right. I can breathe better now. He glanced back at her briefly. Good. The ranch came into view soon, a small wooden cabin, a fenced yard, a barn, and a few animals wandering around. It wasn't large, but it looked cozy and safe. Ethan helped her down again, guiding her slowly. Mara stepped onto the ground and looked around in quiet wonder. This place felt different from the tiring world she had walked through for years. Come inside, he said. You should rest. The cabin smelled like warm wood and fresh air. A handmade quilt lay on the bed. A kettle sat near the fireplace. Ethan brought her a cup of water and placed it in her hands. Drink slowly, he said. She nodded and drank. The water felt cool and soothing on her throat. Sit here, he added, placing a chair near the small table. You need to breathe easy for a while. Mara sat down and watched him move around the cabin, put away his hat, washed dust off his hands, and checked the windows as if making sure she was comfortable. His movements were quiet, almost shy. You don't have to do all this, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. It's no trouble. You were in real distress. Anyone with sense would help. She lowered her eyes. Not everyone does. He paused, then looked at her gently. Well, I'm not everyone. Those simple words touched her deeply. After a few minutes, Ethan stepped outside to check on the horses and bring in supplies. Mara watched him through the window. He worked carefully, speaking softly to her horse to calm it. The way he moved slow, patient, respectful, surprised her. He didn't act like the rough traveler she used to see. He didn't demand attention or gratitude. He simply helped. When he returned, Mara looked stronger. Feeling better? He asked. Yes, thanks to you. He nodded. You can stay here tonight. Hiding in the dark isn't safe. Mara opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan raised a hand gently. It's all right. You need rest. She finally nodded. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe enough to accept help. As the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft orange, Ethan lit a lamp. The warm glow filled the cabin. Mara sat on the bed, wrapped in a clean blanket he had offered. She leaned back, breathing slowly, her fears fading into the evening light. She looked at Ethan and whispered, You saved my breath today. Ethan looked away, almost embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. But Mara knew the truth many people wouldn't. And that thought, more than anything, shocked her. This stranger, this quiet cowboy, had shown her a kind of goodness she thought no longer existed on lonely trails, and she didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning. The sun rose slowly over the wide plains, painting everything in warm gold. Mara woke up earlier than she expected. At first, she did not recognize the ceiling above her or the soft blanket covering her legs. Her mind needed a moment to remember where she was. Only after hearing the quiet clucking of chickens outside did she remember she was at Ethan Ward's small ranch. For the first time in months, she had slept through the whole night without waking up scared, cold, or coughing from dust. She sat up carefully, testing her breath. Her lungs felt clearer than yesterday, and the tightness in her throat was gone. She gently touched her collarbone, remembering how she had struggled on the trail. The coat's collar had twisted so tightly that every breath had felt like a battle. If Ethan had not loosened it, she didn't know what would have happened. She looked around the small cabin bedroom. Everything was simple, but neat wooden furniture, a small window, a handmade quilt. She remembered Ethan insisting she take the only bed while he slept outside near the barn. She had argued with him, saying she didn't want to trouble him, but he had refused gently, telling her that a guest deserved a safe place to rest. When she stepped outside, the cool morning air touched her face. She saw Ethan at the stable, brushing her horse with slow, steady strokes. The animal looked calm, even though yesterday it had been shaken from the fall. Ethan spoke to it in a soft voice, saying something she couldn't hear. Mara walked closer, and her boots made a soft sound on the dry dirt. Ethan turned when he heard her. "You're awake," he said with a small smile. "Yes," she answered. "I feel much better today." He nodded, pleased. "That's good. You needed rest." She watched him for a moment, noticing how gently he handled her horse. She had not expected such kindness. For years she had traveled with merchants, staying around rough men who acted tough, spoke loud, and rarely cared about strangers. She had learned to stay quiet and careful around them. But Ethan was different. He spoke calmly, listened carefully, and moved with patience. "You didn't have to take care of my horse," she said. He shrugged lightly. He was nervous. A calm horse helps a calm rider. Mara wanted to answer, but a sudden gust of wind brushed against them. The sky, which had been clear earlier, was now filling with fast-moving clouds. The wind carried fine dust that stung her eyes. "Storm's coming," Ethan said, looking up. Before she could react, the wind picked up sharply. It blew through the yard with surprising force, making the fence rattle and the barn door thump loudly. Dust swirled everywhere. Mara lifted her hand to shield her eyes, struggling to see. "Come on," Ethan called, motioning toward the stable. She tried to move fast, but her boots slipped on loose dirt. The strong wind pushed against her side, making her lose her balance. She felt herself falling, and panic rushed through her. But before she hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Ethan had reached her in time. He held her steady, blocking the dust with his body. For a few seconds they stayed like that while the wind roared around them. When the gust finally weakened, Ethan helped her stand straight. "Are you hurt?" He asked. "No. I'm fine," she said, still a little breathless, more from surprise than fear. He led her inside the stable and closed the door to keep out the dust. Mara brushed dirt from her sleeves. She looked at Ethan, who now had dust in his hair and on his shirt. But he didn't seem to care. "You're always there right when something goes wrong," she said quietly. He smiled in a shy, almost embarrassed way. "Just doing what anyone would do." But Mara shook her head. Not everyone would. She felt a strange wave of emotion. Not fear, not embarrassment. Instead, she felt something she almost forgot. It surprised her more than the storm. She had grown used to guarding her heart and expecting nothing good from people. Yet in 2 days, this quiet cowboy had shown her a different kind of world. They stayed inside the stable for a few minutes longer, listening to the wind outside. When the storm finally passed, Ethan opened the door and checked the weather. The clouds were moving away, and the sky looked calm again. "Let's go inside," he said. "I made some breakfast earlier." They walked toward the cabin, and Mara noticed how careful he was to walk beside her in case the ground was still slippery. Inside the cabin, the smell of warm food filled the room. Ethan had prepared simple eggs, bread, and cooked potatoes. It wasn't fancy, but to Mara, it felt comforting. They sat across from each other at the wooden table. Mara took a bite and paused. It had been a long time since she ate something made with care. Usually, her meals during travel were dry biscuits or whatever she could cook quickly by a fire. "You really didn't have to do all this," she said again. I know, Ethan replied, but you needed help. That's reason enough. She looked down at her plate, thinking about his words. She wanted to believe they were true, but a part of her found it hard. People rarely helped without asking for something in return. That had been her experience all her life. She wanted to ask him why he was different, but she wasn't sure how. After breakfast, Ethan stepped outside to check on the animals. Mara followed him, wanting to help. Together they fed the horses, watered the chickens, and fixed a loose plank on the fence. Mara noticed how quiet Ethan was while working. He didn't brag or complain. He simply did the tasks with calm focus. Do you always work alone? She asked. Most days, he said. The ranch isn't big, so it's manageable. Don't you get lonely? He paused for a moment, then said, Sometimes. But I've learned to live with it. Mara nodded. She understood loneliness too well. Traveling from place to place, sleeping under the open sky, meeting people who came and went, loneliness became a normal part of her life. But somehow, here on this ranch, the silence felt peaceful, not empty. Later in the afternoon, Mara sat on the porch while Ethan repaired a saddle. She watched him quietly. His movements were slow and careful, and she admired the way he respected even simple tasks. Ethan looked up after a while. You should rest more. She shook her head. I rested enough. Besides, it feels good to sit here and not think about the road. I nodded. The road can be hard. Mara felt a pull in her chest as she remembered the months of travel, the long nights, the cold mornings, the constant worry about food and safety. She swallowed softly and looked away. Ethan, she said. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you loosened my collar yesterday, I was scared. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Not because of you, but because I've met many people on the road who act kind only because they want something later. Ethan lowered his hands and looked at her calmly. I understand, he said. But I didn't help you for any reason like that. I know, she whispered. That's what surprised me the most. Ethan didn't speak right away. Instead, he wiped the saddle with a cloth, thinking carefully. Sometimes he said slowly, people forget that kindness can be simple. Helping someone breathe, helping someone feel safe. Those things shouldn't be strange. Mara felt warmth rise in her chest. She had never heard someone explain kindness like that. It made her want to trust him even more. As sunset approached, the sky filled with soft orange colors. Ethan made a small fire in front of the cabin, and they sat near it to stay warm. The flames crackled gently. Mara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and Ethan handed her a cup of warm tea. They shared stories, short ones at first. Mara told him about the caravan traders she had worked with, how she traveled from town to town, helping with supplies. Ethan told her about the time a stubborn cow refused to move during a thunderstorm. Mara laughed softly when Ethan imitated the cow's angry snorts. For a moment, the world didn't feel heavy anymore. When the stars appeared, Mara looked up at the sky. She breathed deeply, realizing she hadn't felt this peaceful in a long time. Ethan, she said quietly, thank you. For everything, shook his head lightly. You don't need to thank me, but I want to, she said. Ethan gave her a small smile. Then you're welcome. They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt warm, gentle, and real. As the fire crackled and the night grew colder, Mara realized something important. What shocked her wasn't just the storm or falling, or the moment Ethan caught her. What shocked her was the safety she felt around him, something she hadn't felt in years, for the first time since she could remember. She believed that maybe the world still had good people, and maybe she had found one of them at the right moment, and that quiet thought stayed with her long after the fire faded. Morning light slowly touched the land as the sun rose behind the distant hills. The air was cool, the sky was soft blue, and the world felt fresh again. Birds chirped in the nearby trees, and a gentle wind carried the smell of earth across the small ranch. Mara woke up feeling lighter than she had in a long time. For a moment, she stayed still under the warm blanket, listening to the peaceful sounds outside. She remembered the events of the past 2 days, her fall on the trail, her breath almost fading away, Ethan loosening her collar in time. The storm, the quiet safety of the ranch, everything came back to her like pieces of a dream, except this dream was real. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. The room was simple and warm. Ethan had insisted she'd sleep here again, refusing to take the bed back until she was fully strong. She smiled faintly, shaking her head at how stubbornly kind he was. When she stepped out onto the porch, she saw Ethan already awake. He was near the barn, feeding the horses. His hat shaded his face, and the early sunlight made his figure look calm and steady. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Morning," he greeted gently. "Good morning," she replied. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," he said with a small smile. "I rested fine." Mara walked closer. "You didn't have to give me your bed again. You needed it," Ethan said simply. She shook her head softly. "You say that about everything," he chuckled under his breath. "Maybe that's just how I am." Mara watched him for a moment, then helped hand him the bucket of water. Together, they fed the horses, cleaned the stable area, and checked the fence. Working side by side felt natural, like two people who had known each other longer than only 2 days. After chores, Ethan prepared breakfast inside the cabin. Mara offered to help, but he waved his hand lightly. "Just sit. You're still recovering." So she sat at the small wooden table and watched him cook. He wasn't fast, but he was careful. He cracked the eggs gently, stirred them slowly, and made sure the bread didn't burn. His simple, thoughtful movements gave Mara a quiet warmth in her chest. They ate together, talking lightly about the weather, the ranch, and the road. Mara felt calm, something she wasn't used to feeling while traveling. After breakfast, she stepped outside for a small walk around the ranch to stretch her legs. But as she looked at the wide landscape, soft hills, tall grass, distant birds, she felt something unexpected. A pull in her heart. A feeling she couldn't explain. She didn't want to leave this place. Still, she knew she had a journey ahead. She had planned to help another merchant group in a nearby town. She had promised to reach there before the end of the week. So after a long breath, she walked back to the cabin to speak with Ethan. He was sitting on the porch steps, fixing a piece of worn leather. She took a quiet seat beside him. "Ethan," she began gently, "I think I should leave soon." He paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you want, it's what I'd planned before," she said. "But now," she hesitated, unsure how to explain the feeling in her heart. "Now it feels harder." Ethan looked at her, patience in his eyes. "Why?" She took a deep breath. "Because I feel safe here. I haven't felt safe in a long time." He lowered his gaze to the ground, his voice soft. "You can stay longer if you want." "I don't mind," she smiled faintly. "But I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said quietly, almost as if he wasn't used to saying such things aloud. "You're a good guest." Silence settled between them. A comfortable silence, but also a heavy one full of unspoken thoughts. After a while, Ethan stood up. "Let me check your horse before you go." "I made sure he's rested, but I want to be certain." She followed him to the stable. He examined the horse's hooves, brushed its coat, tightened its saddle, and made sure the reins were strong enough. His attention to detail amazed Mara. He cared for her horse as if it were his own. "You're gentle with animals," she said. "And people," he added quietly. Surprising her, she smiled softly. When the horse was ready, she turned to Ethan. She had expected to feel grateful and confident. Instead, she felt something like sadness rising in her chest. "I'm ready," she said. Ethan nodded, though his eyes looked a little dimmer than before. He walked her to the trail. Mara stood beside her horse, her hand on its mane. Ethan stood a few steps away, as if giving her space but staying close enough to help if she needed it. She opened her mouth to say goodbye, but she couldn't. Not yet, instead. "Ethan." "Yes." "Why did you help me that day?" "You didn't know me. You could have just passed by." Ethan took a slow breath. "Because you needed help. And I was there." "That's reason enough." Mara searched his face. There was no hidden meaning in his eyes. No expectation. just honesty. You loosened my collar when I couldn't breathe, she said. You carried me here. You stayed up to make sure I was safe. And you asked for nothing. He shook his head lightly. You didn't owe me anything. Her voice grew softer. I know. That's what shocked me the most. Their eyes met quietly. Then Mara gently placed her foot in the stirrup and mounted her horse. She held the reins tightly, preparing to ride. But something inside her refused to move forward. She turned her horse back around and stared at the ranch, at the warm cabin, at the wide land, and finally at Ethan. Ethan, can I ask you another question? Of course. If I stayed here, not as a guest, but just stayed, would that be all right? Ethan blinked in surprise. Not disbelief, just gentle surprise, like someone hearing something they had hoped for but never expected. You want to stay? He asked quietly. Mara nodded, her voice almost a whisper. I don't know where else I feel this safe, and I don't want to ride away from a place that feels like home. Ethan didn't smile immediately. Instead, he looked down at the ground for a long moment, as if thinking deeply. Mara's heart beat fast. She wondered if she had said the wrong thing. But then Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. You can stay, he said. As long as you want. You're welcome here. Soft breath escaped Mara. Almost like relief she had been holding in for years, she dismounted the horse slowly and walked toward him. She didn't hug him, nor did he reach out. They simply stood close, sharing a warm silence, understanding each other without speaking further. Ethan took her horse back to the stable. Mara followed him with quiet steps. They removed the saddle together and brushed the horse calmly. It felt almost symbolic, like they were settling into a new chapter. Later, as the sun set behind the hills, bathing the ranch in soft orange light, Mara sat on the porch again. This time Ethan sat beside her without hesitation. You know, she said gently, the day you loosened my collar, that was the day my life changed. Ethan looked down, a shy smile touching his lips. I'm glad you're all right. That's what matters. She nodded. It wasn't just that. You showed me something I thought no longer existed. What's that? He asked softly. Kindness, she said. Real kindness. Ethan didn't answer right away, but the way he looked at her said everything. The stars came out slowly, one by one. The night grew calm. The fire crackled gently in front of them. Mara pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and Ethan handed her a warm cup of tea. They sat like that for a long time, to people who had met by chance, now sharing a peaceful moment that felt like it belonged to both of them. And as the night deepened, Mara knew without a doubt that she had made the right choice. She wasn't riding away anymore. She wasn't running from danger or loneliness. She had found a safe place. She had found a gentle cowboy. And she had found a new beginning she never expected. Her journey didn't end on that trail. It began here.